Hi, you are watching Global Insights on Voice of Canada, and this is Sana Haroon. A month after the United States military's chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan, it saw the Taliban swiftly take over the country. U.S. officials face questioning by members of Congress over the decisions made.
The hasty American exit from Afghanistan drew fire on Capitol Hill.
We left behind thousands of Afghans who served us alongside of us, who were vetted and approved to come here.
Lawmakers pressed the defense secretary and top generals on the chaotic withdrawal. A retreat that left the Taliban in control, 13 American soldiers and dozens of Afghan civilians dead, and an unknown number left behind.
An unforced, disgraceful humiliation that didn't have to happen.
Under oath, the generals admitted they didn't see it coming.
What did we miss?
We absolutely missed the rapid 11-day collapse of the Afghan military and the collapse of their government.
They also testified they recommended President Biden violate a withdrawal deal between former President Trump and the Taliban and leave a force of 2,500 U.S. troops in the country.
If we went below that number, in fact, we would probably witness a collapse of the Afghan government and the Afghan military.
That contradicts what Biden has previously claimed. The generals believe staying beyond August 31st all but certainly would have led to a new war with the Taliban. Leaving has exacted a toll on American credibility.
Damage is one word that could be used, yes.
Especially because there's no longer any American presence in the country, no diplomats, and no one to monitor threats from Al-Qaeda, the very thing that started America's longest war.
Local residents in the community in central Labori province, Thailand, were seen wading through chest-level water and transporting household belongings in boats on Wednesday after floodwaters were on the rise.
เมื่อคืนมาถึงยันเช้านะครับขอโทษยันเช้ามาถึงต้นโพซึ่งผมคาดการณ์ไว้แล้วยังไงเช้านี้ต้องต้นโพแน่นอนระดับน้ำด้านล่างจะอยู่ที่หน้าอก
Video captured the moments lava rocks from the Cambo Viejo volcano on La Palma fell into the Atlantic Ocean early Monday morning in Spain, 9 days after it started to flow down the mountain.
Como se hizo camino, no lo...
Former President Barack Obama was joined by his wife and former First Lady Michelle as the couple broke ground on the Obama Presidential Center in Chicago, Illinois on Tuesday.
Jackson Park to officially break ground on the Obama Presidential Center, for we are living through a moment of rapid disruption in technology, in the global economy, in our social arrangements, in our environment. And those disruptions can be scary. And too often it feels as if our major institutions have failed to respond effectively to these disruptions, to help people find economic security or manage our differences or protect our planet. And what we've seen is that in the breach, a culture of cynicism and mistrust can grow. You start seeing more division, and increasingly bitter conflict, politics that feeds anger and resentment towards those who aren't like us, and starts turning away from democratic principles in favor of tribalism and might makes right. This is true in Europe and in Asia. It's true in Latin America and in Africa. And it happens to be true here at home. But the good news is we can reverse these trends. I don't believe it's inevitable that we succumb to paralysis or mutual hatred or abandon democracy in favor of systems that reserve power and privilege for the few. As has been true throughout our history, I believe we have it in us to reimagine our institutions, to make them responsive to today's challenges, and to rebuild our societies in a way that gives more and more people a better life. And through this center, we intend to give these young people and those who are coming up behind them whatever training, support, resources, and platforms they need to fully realize their potential, to collaborate and share ideas, and to bring their dreams to scale. Thank you very much. Now we're going to go grab some shovels and break some ground.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said Tuesday the government was making all necessary preparations in the supply chain ahead of Christmas as Britons continued to panic by fuel leading to queues at some gas stations.
Cars in the normal way to see their loved ones or whatever it is, and I know how frustrating and infuriating it must have been to worry about a shortage of petrol or fuel. We now are starting to see the situation improve. We're hearing from industry that supplies are coming back onto the forecourts in the normal way, and I would just really urge everybody to just go about their business in the normal way and fill up in the normal way when you really need it, and you know, things will start to improve. What we want to do is make sure that we have all the preparations necessary to get through till Christmas and beyond, not just in the supplying the petrol stations, but all parts of our supply chain. You're seeing the global economy really sucking in a huge amount of demand for gas, for lorry drivers. There are shortages around the world. It's affecting countries across the world. But we've got to make sure we have everything in place as the recovery continues, and that's what we're doing. I think what happened with the fuel issue with the petrol pump business was that unfortunately There was a slightly misleading account of something which got leaked and caused a big, totally understandable surge in public demand. We think we can, the actual number of lorry drivers that are short in that particular sector isn't very big, but generally there is a shortage in that profession around the world, and what we want to see is an emphasis on high wage, a high skill, a high productivity approach to our economy. What I don't think people in this country want to do is fix all our problems with uncontrolled immigration again. We tried that for a long time, 20 years or so, perhaps longer, and in the end people could see that it was leading to a low wage, low skill approach without enough investment in people or in equipment, in capital, and that's not the way we want the UK to develop and grow. What we've got is a global economy that is recovering from what has been a once-in-a-century pandemic, and that has caused some particular shortages. I've mentioned a couple, HGV drivers and gas. And those shortages are a function of huge global demand, but we're meeting them, and what we have is all sorts of plans in place to make sure that as we go forward into the new year, that we have everything necessary to protect our supply chains and keep things moving. But as I said, what we're seeing now, what we're hearing now from industry is that the situation on the forecourts in our petrol stations is stable.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki defended U.S. President Joe Biden's handing of the troop withdrawals from Afghanistan on Tuesday.
No malintent, but the question asked by George Stephanopoulos was, but your top military advisors warned against withdrawing on this timeline. They wanted you to keep about 2,500 troops. The president said, no, they didn't. It was split. That wasn't true. That wasn't true. It was split. I think that's a pretty key part of that phrasing there. Later on, George Stephanopoulos said, so no one told your military advisors, did not tell you, quote, no, we should just keep 2,500 troops. It's been a stable situation for the last several years. We can do that. We can continue to do that. No one said that to me that I can recall. I would note today, in the testimony that was given by Secretary Austin, by General Milley, they made clear, Secretary Austin specifically said, if you stayed there at a forced posture of 2,500, certainly you'd be in a fight with the Taliban and you'd have to reinforce. So what should everybody take from that? There was a range of viewpoints, as was evidenced by their testimony today, that were presented to the president, that were presented to his national security team, as would be expected, as he asked for. He asked for a clear-eyed, didn't ask them not to sugarcoat it, what their recommendations were. It was also clear to him that that would not be a long-standing recommendation, that there would need to be an escalation, an increase in troop numbers. It would also mean war with the Taliban, and it would also mean the potential loss of casualties. The president was just not willing to make that decision. He didn't think it was in the interest of the American people or the interest of our troops.
The president said his military commanders were split. We now know that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Milley, the head of CENTCOM, General McKenzie, and the commander on the ground, General Miller, all recommended the president keep 2,500 troops. So who in his military advisors told him it'd be fine to pull everybody out?
I'm not going to get in specific details of who recommended what, but I would reiterate a little bit of what I conveyed before, which is that there were recommendations made by a range of his advisors, something he welcomed, something he asked them to come to him clear-eyed about, to give him candid advice. What is also clear, though, and I'd also note again what Secretary Austin said today, is that was not going to be a sustainable over the long-term troop presence. We were always going to look at escalating the numbers, at potentially going back to war with the Taliban, at risking casualties. That was not a decision the president was going to make. But of course, he welcomes advice, he welcomed advice. Ultimately, it's up to the commander-in-chief to make a decision. He made a decision it was time to end a 20-year war.
We're saying here that military advisors to the president said it was okay to pull all the troops out, that it'd be fine.
That's not what I said. What I said was, they recommended, I think we should not dumb this down for anybody here. We're talking about the initial phase post May 1. We're not talking about long-term recommendations. There was no one who said 5 years from now we could have 2,500 troops and that would be sustainable. And I think that's important for people to know and to understand. It's also important to note that the risks we were talking about here were the possibility, the likelihood of increasing a troop presence, which we now know to absolutely have been the reality, given it required 6,000 troops to just protect the airport, something we now know.
But I think the public wants to know, if the generals and military advisors give advice, how will the president use and process that, and how will he talk about it publicly? That matters to the public. Did the president convey accurately what these generals were saying to him?
He conveyed in the interview? In what aspect?
Well, in the interview, and then going forward, can they understand how the president will use that kind of information when we see there's a conflict between what the generals were saying and the president's public statements with respect to Afghanistan?
Well, the president made clear that the advice was split. He didn't outline what every individual conveyed to him in private advice, as I don't think anyone in the American public would expect. Obviously, they're testifying before Congress today. They're answering questions accurately. They're providing more detail on their advice, as they should. That's how that process works, and as they should. I think what the American people should know is the president is always going to welcome a range of advice. He asks for candor, he asks for directness, and in any scenario, he's not looking for a bunch of yes men and women. And what that means is that ultimately, he's going to have to make the decision about what's in the best interest of the United States. If there's conflicting advice given, by necessity, some people's advice will not be taken.
U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin told Congress on Tuesday that the Afghan army's sudden collapse caught the Pentagon off guard as he acknowledged miscalculations in America's longest war, including corruption and damaged morale in Afghan ranks.
We helped build a state, Mr. Chairman, but we could not forge a nation. The fact that the Afghan army that we and our partners trained simply melted away, in many cases without firing a shot, took us all by surprise, and it would be dishonest to claim otherwise. We need to consider some uncomfortable truths. That we didn't fully comprehend the depth of corruption and poor leadership in the senior ranks. That we didn't grasp the damaging effect of frequent and unexplained rotations by President Ghani of his commanders. That we didn't anticipate the snowball effect caused by the deals that the Taliban commanders struck with local leaders in the wake of the Doha Agreement. And that the Doha Agreement itself had a demoralizing effect on Afghan soldiers. And finally, that we failed to grasp that there was only so much for which and for whom many of the Afghan forces would fight. We provided the Afghan military with equipment and aircraft and the skills to use it. Over the years, they often fought bravely. Tens of thousands of Afghan soldiers and police died. But in the end, we couldn't provide them with the will to win. At least not all of them. And as a veteran of that war, I am personally reckoning with all of that. But I hope, as I said at the outset, that we do not allow a debate about how this war ended to cloud our pride in the way that our people fought it. They prevented another 9/11. They showed extraordinary courage and compassion in the war's last days. And they made lasting progress in Afghanistan that the Taliban will find difficult to reverse and that the international community should work hard to preserve.
To communicate with the Chinese by Department of Defense guidance.
At the height of this operation, an aircraft was taking off every 45 minutes. And not a single sortie was missed for maintenance, fuel, or logistical problems. It was the largest airlift conducted in U.S. history, and it was executed in 17 days. Was it perfect? Of course not. We moved so many people so quickly out of Kabul that we ran into capacity and screening problems at intermediate staging bases outside Afghanistan. And we're still working to get Americans out who wish to leave. And we did not get out all of our Afghan allies enrolled in a special immigrant visa program. We take that seriously, and that's why we're working across the interagency to continue facilitating their departure.
It is clear, it is obvious, the war in Afghanistan did not end on the terms we wanted. With the Taliban now in power in Kabul. Although the NEO was unprecedented and is the largest air evacuation in history, evacuating 124,000 people, it came at an incredible cost of 11 Marines, 1 soldier, and a Navy corpsman. Those 13 gave their lives so that people they never met will have an opportunity to live in freedom. And we must remember that the Taliban was and remains a terrorist organization, and they still have not broken ties with Al-Qaeda. I have no illusions who we are dealing with. It remains to be seen whether or not the Taliban can consolidate power, or if the country will further fracture into civil war. But we must continue to protect the United States of America and its people from terrorist attacks coming from Afghanistan. A reconstituted Al-Qaeda or ISIS with aspirations to attack the United States is a very real possibility. And those conditions, to include activity in ungoverned spaces, could present themselves in the next 12 to 36 months. That mission will be much harder now.
People in the United Kingdom should buy petrol as usual. Environment Minister George Ostis said on Monday, adding there was no shortage of fuel, but problems were being caused by consumers' panic buying fuel they didn't need.
Well, we can only continue to reassure people that we have plenty of petrol, both in storage, coming out of those refineries as well. And the only reason that we have an issue at the moment with some petrol stations not having petrol in the forecourts is that people are buying petrol and they wouldn't. The most important thing everyone can do is just get back to normal, fill their cars up as they normally would, and not buy petrol unless they need it. But we are bringing MOD trainers in to accelerate some of the HGV training. To clear a backlog of people who want to carry out those tests. So there's definitely a role there for the MOD, and we're doing that. In terms of other things, we've no plans at the moment to bring in the Army to actually do driving, but we always have a civil contingencies section within the Army that's always on standby should they be needed, but we don't judge that's necessary at the moment. Well, look, I think there's a number of things that we need to look at. First of all, the infrastructure that we've got for lorry drivers to park up and sleep. Shower facilities often not good enough. We need to really think after this about how we improve some of those conditions and the infrastructure to support our long distance lorry drivers. They're an absolutely critical part of our economy. Pay is already rising, we're seeing pay rates rise, and I think we're going to see that rise further, and that is only right. I think the other thing that we will see if we can get more people into the sector is perhaps lorry drivers able to work shorter hours, maybe 4 days a week, given that many of those days are away from their family, and you can only facilitate that kind of system if you've got sufficient drivers coming into the system.
I rang up from 5 o'clock looking for petrol, but there wasn't any available. So luckily I rang here at 6:30 and they said they were open. So I just came here and then joined the queue.
Just about. I've driven around Kidderminster since 5:30 this morning trying to find fuel.
How many different places have you been to?
I've been to 4 garages in Kiddie and they were all closed.
I haven't been out and panic bought like all the other sheep and idiots. So I've waited here today on my way to work, got some fuel, and the price has gone up by...
Keep watching Global Insights on Voice of Canada for further updates. Visit our website voiceofcanada.tv.